Senator from Maryland is recognized.
Madam President, I ask that the call of the quorum be vacated.
Without objection, so ordered.
Madam President, I rise today to address one of the most important issues facing the Super Committee. That is, where does Social Security fit into their plans? Now, I know the Super Committee is doing a great job. They're working in a steady way to see how we can be a more frugal government. But while we're trying to be frugal, how we also meet our responsibilities for the national defense, and also how we maintain our social contract. Now, to me, one of the most essential programs in the social contract, that is the contract between the United States government and its people, is Social Security. For more than 75 years, under every president, we have worked in a bipartisan way to ensure the security and the solvency and the safety of Social Security. Every president has agreed that Social Security should be undeniable, available to everybody, reliable, that it's there when you need it, and inflation-proof. Inflation-proof. I was in the House when we were teetering on a collapse with Social Security. Ronald Reagan was in the White House. Tip O'Neill was the Speaker of the House. Bob Dole was the Majority Leader in the Senate. And we and Bob Byrd, we went to work and made sure that Social Security was solvent for all 30 or 40 years. Under Bill Clinton, we also took positive, forward steps. Now, under President Bush, he wanted to privatize it. That's the way he saw entailing its future solvency. We fought that, but we still have money in the trust fund. And now where are we? Well, there are those who say we've got to reduce the debt. Hey, I know we've got to reduce the debt. Madam Chair, we've had extensive conversations. You have some very meaty ideas worthy of consideration. But let's make it clear, Social Security should not be on the table. When they say all options are on the table, let's put all options on the table for those programs that created the debt, that created the deficit. Social Security did not create our debt. And why it is part of the Super Committee conversation, debate, and even hit list, I don't know. Now, that casts no disparagement against any member of the committee. I'm talking about somehow or another, editorial boards who know everything about everything all of the time have said you've got to do something about Social Security. We know that we have to reform Social Security to modernize it for a 21st century economy and a 21st century demography. We get that. But it doesn't belong in the Super Committee, up against the wall with impossible deadlines, up against the wall with impossible mandate. So while they're looking at revenue, discretionary spending, military spending, Social Security does not belong there. The reform of Social Security belongs in another environment. So that's position number one. Position number two is, what are we doing on Social Security? Well, I am concerned that we're about to shred this social contract, and we're going to do it by doing something called the chained CPI. Isn't that a terrible word? Chained CPI. Wow. I'm afraid that we're going to change seniors to poverty. So let me tell you what a chained CPI is. When you read all of the books that we get, policy books, chained CPI would cut Social Security by $112 billion over 10 years. They do it by changing the way the cost of living is calculated. It's based on kind of this theory. It's based on a theory of human behavior, one word, those social engineering schemes. And what it says is this: it assumes that a consumer will substitute lower cost items when the cost that they normally purchase goes up. Well, that means, again, in theory, if the price of apples goes up, you're going to buy an orange. It sounds good, but for the debate on Social Security, it is inappropriate because the market basket of purchase by senior citizens, validated economic and marketing groups, says their largest expenditure is health care, and the reason they do it on health care is because they need it to keep alive. This isn't trading a latte for Dunkin' Donuts. This isn't going from arugula to bib lettuce. This is life. This is life on the line when we're about to cut the seniors' bottom line. We've got to get real here and talk about what is the way seniors live, what is it they need to do to stay alive, and what is it their purchasing power. So here's, not Barb Mikulski, the Social Security people themselves say there's something called, the market basket for elderly, CPIE. And it means they spend their money on health care, on food, and on energy, and in many cases, housing. They cannot reduce those costs. Those are fixed costs for which they have no choice and no negotiating power. Our citizens, our senior citizens, cannot negotiate on their heat. They cannot negotiate much on their prescription drugs. Oh, they might go from a brand name to a generic, but if their cost of living is being squeezed down, they can't be able to do it. You can't substitute your medication, your insulin, and substitute it for apricot juice. If the cost of prescription drugs goes up, so does medication. So I'm concerned that this changed CPI, human behavior, untested, untried social engineering scheme is going to become the basis by which we calculate the cost of living. Now let me go to some facts. And by the way, this isn't Senator Barb Mikulski talking. This is the Social Security actuary. The actuary actually giving accurate facts. Let's go to the A word. The actuary actually giving accurate facts. First of all, they say that this is a technical fix and doesn't mean a whole lot to seniors. Actually, the changed CPI will fundamentally restructure Social Security. If we do it, we will be complicit and complacent in creating a structurally induced poverty for old people. What do we mean? Well, if you look at this chart, and this comes from the actuary, that if you go to the changed CPI and the purchasing power that they talk, first of all, it will go into immediate effect. Then it actually cuts. It's not like, you know how the seniors were upset that they didn't get a cost of living 2 years in a row? They'll actually get a reduced benefit. And under the way this will be calculated, hypothetically, if you're now getting $15,132 on Social Security, if you're getting it when you're 65 now, 10 years from now, your benefit will be reduced. Not only won't you get your cost of living, but your benefit will be reduced to $14,572. Now, if you continue to live and you're 85, it will be reduced to $14,148. It compounds itself. So God forbid you even make it another 30 years, because under what the CPI, change CPI would do, is you would essentially lose over close to $1,600 in benefits. I can't believe this. I can't believe we're even talking about it, because if we're talking about going with the true market basket, what you should do is actually have this increased. I won't go through all of the numbers, but they are significant and they are severe. Now, there's another thing going around here on the floor. Oh, Senator Mikulski, why are you so upset? It'll hurt future beneficiaries. Well, I'm upset because no matter what time it affects a beneficiary, it affects a beneficiary. But what everyone fails to grasp is this will be an immediate, underline the word, immediate cut. According to the Social Security's chief actuary, if we pass this year, this change CPI begins December of 2012. So 1 year from this December, it would go into effect. And that means if you're 65 years old, your benefit will be reduced that year. By the time 10 years later, your benefit will have been reduced 5 times as much. And if you make it to 85, your benefit will actually be reduced by 10 times as much. This is, to me, a horrifying idea. The current CPIW, which is the way we call the cost of living, was used in 1972. It was the only measure we had at the time, and it was viewed as an advanced thing for an inflation-proof benefit. Now, when we look at it, what we know is that we know the purchasing power, not the purchasing power, what is the market basket that seniors use. Now, change CPI might be fine in other areas or other categories. I'm not going to debate this here today. But what I do want to do this time, this place, I want to sound the alert. I'm going to ring the bell. I'm going to be at my battle station saying to every member of our caucus and every member of the people on the other side of the aisle, please read up on this. Know what we're doing. If you're going to vote, I don't want to hear buyer's remorse a year from now. I don't want to hear buyer's remorse 2 years from now. I don't want to hear from the seniors in my home state of Maryland to say, where were you, Barbara? Did you say anything? Did you do anything? So I'm saying here today, get out your policy books and for God's sake, read them. Read them. And don't read what this think tank does or that editorial board says. Read the Social Security actuary. Because I'm telling you, we're about to do something that is irrevocable. You know, Mr. President, I believe in old-fashioned values. And one of the great ones is honor thy father and their mother and your mother. It's just not a great commandment to live by. It's sure a great public policy to govern by. The American people every day, particularly who work hard, you know, and live by the rules, go by the rules, paying the Social Security over a lifetime. We said to them, if you do that, your Social Security will be a guaranteed benefit. It will be a lifetime benefit. It will be reliable and undeniable, and it will be inflation-proof. Mr. President, FDR signed that bill that created that contract. Every president, regardless of the party, has kept that promise. And it's up to this Congress not to shred the social contract on the seniors of the United States of America. Mr. President, I want to yield the floor to someone from the Finance Committee who's done so much work on this, such great work, such due diligence, and really has a grasp of both the policy and the impact that it has on the people. Mr. President, I'd like to yield the floor and hope the Chair recognizes my wonderful colleague from Washington State, Senator Maria Cantwell.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to thank my colleague, the senior senator from Maryland, for her leadership on this issue, for protecting seniors and protecting women. And it seems to me that every time we have a battle that is about undercutting the benefits to women in America, Barbara Mikulski is on the Senate floor or on the halls in various meeting rooms making sure that America knows what these proposals are. And I couldn't have been more proud of her when she led all the women senators on the Democratic side of the aisle to push back on the Bush administration's proposal to privatize Social Security. At that point in time, she most succinctly told Americans that women, more than any other in that age group, would suffer because they live longer, they depend on Social Security, and if Social Security was privatized, women would feel the brunt of it. And so I'm proud to be out here this afternoon with her to talk about this proposal that has been, we can't tell because we don't know, we're not on the super committee, but it seems to be floating around in various forms, various organizations may be talking about it, the notion that we would change Social Security. Well, I know at home in my state of Washington, people seem to be confused when we're talking about our budgets, and we're obviously having to make tough budget decisions. So people around dining room tables, around city halls, around our state capitol, and here in Congress are having discussions about how to have a budget to live within our means. But when you talk to them about the primary way, in one proposal that surfaced in the last budget negotiations in July, was to automatically take $300 billion of cuts right off the top as the major proposal out of a concept called chain CPI. When you think about that, the first shot of budget cuts would be on the backs of seniors. It's almost as if somebody thought seniors cooked up exotic financial instruments and foisted them on the U.S. economy, and somehow they should pay the price, when we know that's not the case. So why are people targeting these seniors now? And we're not sure if they are. We've just heard various rumors that perhaps this notion of change CPI, a change in Social Security benefits, as my colleague just outlined, would be a proposal. So I am here to say I am not for having the seniors in America share the brunt of sacrifice with a proposal like this that would clearly be on the backs of seniors. It's not something they can afford. I know some of my colleagues may have endorsed chain CPI, a change in the consumer price index to calculate inflation, but that really is a cut that would increase over time, and literally the longer you live, the more you're penalized. It's such a disproportionate impact to women who do live longer than men and really count on those benefits for their living. In my state, changes to the cost of living adjustment would hurt more than 1 million Washingtonians. Social Security has kept about 30% of Washington residents who are 65 and older out of poverty. That's what it's done for them. And what's more, 25% of seniors in my state live on Social Security alone. So there is a population that is depending on Social Security, and it makes up either, as I said, they're living on it alone, or it's making up another 21% of them. It makes up 90% of their income. So I think this demonstrates that we cannot support these kinds of cuts, especially at the magnitude that this proposal is talking about. The Social Security Office of the Actuary has reported that chain CPI would reduce a COLA by about 0.3% points a year. So let's look at that example. A single woman, 65 years old, in Washington State would get a monthly benefit of about $1,100 a month, or $13,200 annually. By age 80, if change CPI would pass, that would result in $56 per month, or $672 annually cut in that benefit. So that's less food, that's less medicine, that's less vital care for these seniors. If that individual actually lived to 90 years old, it would be an $87 a month cut and a $1,044 cut annually. That, if you think about the cost that these seniors endure, and I, for one, have proposed changing the market basket of goods that the CPI is based on, because if you think about it, we have a market basket of goods for their CPI that are what the overall economy looks at, but seniors have a much more expensive market basket of goods. They have to buy more medicine, they have other additional out-of-pocket health care expenses, and so their costs are going up at a higher rate. But this proposal, if you think about it, the average monthly cost of food for a single elderly individual is about $231 per month. That's what the average is, about $53 a week. And that's based on data from the Elder Economic Security Standard Index. So an individual at 80 basically means they'd have 1 week less groceries under changed CPI. That's what it means. They would have 1 week less of groceries every month. And in my state, when you think about the average out-of-pocket health care expenses that seniors have for expenses, that average out-of-pocket expense rises by $1,400 for an individual. So that is, if you just think about it alone, the increase in health care out-of-pocket expenses basically wipes out where many seniors are for any kind of remaining income. And certainly if we put this kind of cut on top of that, it would make it clear that seniors would be getting less from Social Security. Now, we just recently, for the first time since 2009, gave seniors an increase to their cost of living adjustment. And so now what are we going to do? Go backwards and take it away from them? For 75 years, Americans have been paying into Social Security with the promise that they would receive these benefits in their retirement years. And now is not a time to break that promise. So I think my colleague has clearly come to the floor with a message to our other colleagues who aren't here this afternoon to say, take a look at the details of this proposal. This is not a simple proposal about in the future someone is going to get less than they might under some other plan. This is about a cut in the benefit formula today that would impact seniors if implemented. And so I am here with my colleague to say this is not, our economic situation has not been caused by seniors coming to Capitol Hill and proposing that we have opaque derivative markets. It wasn't caused by seniors coming here saying, you know what, let's go ahead and have the banks get rid of Glass-Steagall and so the banks can do whatever they want. I mean, seniors didn't come here and foist this economic situation on us, and yet where are the other proposals to help fix that? Yet the #1 proposal that we saw circulating in July was to right off the bat $300 billion coming on the backs of seniors. So that same proposal is still circulating here in the halls of Congress, and my colleague and I are here this afternoon to say it's not the proposal we should be considering. And so I hope our other colleagues will stand up to protect seniors, particularly women who are living longer, and making sure that they have these important Social Security benefits. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.
Would the gentlelady, Mr. President, I'd like to take the floor to ask the gentlelady yield to a question or two.
Yes,
first of all,
I will.
I want to compliment the gentlelady for the really wonderful teaching that she just did on this. You're a member as a Finance Committee in which all deliberations are due on Social Security. Has there been a hearing in the Finance Committee on the chained CPI, and really have experts and senior advocacy groups come and share their views with the Congress?
Well, Mr. President, I can say to the senator from Maryland, in my time period there, I don't remember any hearing or briefing on change CPI. That was the focus of the hearing. I don't know if in the last 15 or 20 years somebody hasn't suggested or had a hearing on it. But in
how long you've been on the Finance Committee?
2 years.
How many?
2 years.
So 2 years. So in the 2 years, particularly since this has come up, this hasn't come up. Another question about the Finance Committee, which also has jurisdiction over Medicare. Is it the gentlelady's understanding that both in the super committee and other reforms that the Congress' intent is to raise premiums and co-payments and a variety of other things on seniors, or is that just one of those foggy things out there in the ethers?
Mr. President, I can tell the senator from Maryland, there's lots of ideas that people are suggesting. I don't know the details by the super committee, or to say that the Finance Committee is backing up the super committee on those ideas. I know that we have to live in our budget, and we have to make some tough decisions. And there are many positive things in the health care law that are about allowing seniors to stay in their homes and receive care as opposed to going into nursing homes. Very, very positive. Actually helps reduce significantly the cost and delivery of health care. There are things in there that are going to help us get more transparency on drug prices. And certainly many of us would like to have direct negotiations on drug prices and drive the cost down even further for seniors. And obviously there's reforms in there that will help us get more efficient in the delivery system. And those are things that you can accentuate by moving more quickly. I know the presiding officer coming from the state of Minnesota with the Mayo Clinic certainly understands about outcome-based health care and preventative medicine, and all those things are things that seniors would like to see in reform that actually help deliver better care and drive down cost. So those are the proposals that I think that we should be discussing and are positive for seniors and help seniors and deliver the kind of care that is more efficient and cost effective. But asking them to take it right on the chin with something like this proposal is, as my colleague outlined as well, just something that we're not willing to do. So I thank the President again. I thank the senator from Maryland for her tireless leadership on behalf of women in America and making sure they can make do in this tough economy. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The Senate is back in a quorum call now. Earlier today,
Members passed a bill to repeal the requirement that the government withhold 3% of payments to contractors. That vote was 95-0, with one senator, Senator Snowe, voting present. Also today, senators rejected a bid to advance 2 resolutions aimed at rolling back government regulations, one regarding the FCC's stance on net neutrality, and the other, offered by Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul, on the EPA's position on cross-state air pollution. Next week, we expect more work on 2012 federal spending. Current funding expires November 18th.
Senator from Washington.
I ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations: calendar number 472, 473, 474, 475, 476, 477, 478, 479, 480, 481, 482, 483, 484, 485, 486, 487, 488, 489, 490, 491, and 492, and all the nominations on the Secretary's desk in the Air Force, Army, and Navy. That the nominations be confirmed en bloc, the motion to reconsider be made and laid on the table with no intervening action or debate, that no further motions be in order to any of the nominations, and that any related statements be printed in the record, that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's actions, and that Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that on Tuesday, November 15th, 2011, at 11 a.m., the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations: calendar number 354 and calendar number 355. That there be 1 hour for debate equally divided in the usual form, that upon the use of yielding back of time, the Senate proceed to vote without intervening action or debate on the nominations in the order listed, that the motion to reconsider be considered laid on the table with no intervening action or debate, and that no further motions be in order to any of the nominees, any of the nominations, that the statements related to the nomination be printed in the record, and that the President be notified immediately of the Senate's actions, and that the Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 226 and S363.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 226, S363, a bill to authorize the Secretary of Commerce to convey property of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to the city of Pascagoula, Mississippi, and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Wicker amendment at the desk be agreed to, the bill as amended be read a third time and passed, the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table, and that any statements relating to the bill appear at this point in the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Judiciary Committee be discharged from the further consideration of H.R. 398 and the Senate proceed to its consideration.
Clerk will report.
H.R. 398, an act to amend the Immigration and Nationality Act to toll during active duty service abroad in the foreign armed forces the periods of time to file a petition and appear for an interview to remove the conditional basis for permanent resident status and for other purposes.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the bill be
Excuse me. Without objection, the committee is discharged.
Mr. President,
And
I
the
ask
Senate will proceed to the measure.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the bill be read a third time and the Senate now proceed to a vote on the passage of the bill.
Without objection.
And I ask unanimous consent that the motion...
There is no further debate. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The bill is passed.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the motion to reconsider be laid on the table with no intervening action or debate, and any statements related to the bill be placed in the record at the appropriate place as if read.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the consideration of S.Res. 320 submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
S.Res. 320, designating November 26, 2011 as Small Business Saturday and supporting efforts to increase awareness of the value of locally owned small businesses.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, and any related statements be printed in the record as if read.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S.Res. 321, which is submitted earlier today.
Clerk will report.
S.Res. 321, commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Federal Executive Boards.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Mr. President, I ask further that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, and that any statements relating to the measure be printed in the record at the appropriate place.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, the Senate adjourn until 2 p.m. on Monday, November 14, 2011, that the following, the prayer and pledge, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day. That following any leader remarks, the Senate be in a period of morning business until 3 p.m. with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designee, and that at 3 p.m. the Senate proceed to consideration of H.R. 3554, the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill, for debate only.
Without objection.
There will be no roll call votes on Monday. Senators should be expect 2 votes at noon on Tuesday. Those votes will be the confirmation of Gleason and Rogers nominations. If there are no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 2 p.m. on Monday, November 14th.
So the Senate's gavelled out, but earlier today, members passed a bill to repeal the requirement that the government withhold 3% of payments to contractors. That vote was 95-0.